Let's wrap up this section by continuing to work on the date counter challenge that we started earlier. So, in this part 2 of the challenge, we will upgrade the date counter that we built before. So, we can still click here on these buttons to move forward in the date, but now we can also directly go to a date by defining a count here. So for example, 1,000 days from now is, well, this one here, or 10,000 or 100,000, and you can keep going as you wish. So let's put it back to 1. And so that is the upgrade here for the counter, and the step is also different. So instead of these buttons that we had before, so similar to these ones, we now have this slider. And so now if we click here, we move up these 7 here. But the 7 was now defined using this nice slider. And this slider is actually just another type of HTML input element. But I will show you that here in a minute. Finally, what we also have is that we can reset. So when we click reset, it goes back to 0 here and back to 1 in the step. And this button is only visible when one of these two changes. So let's go back and let's do that. So here I still have the code from the previous challenge. And what I'm going to do now is to fork this. So this will basically create a copy out of that other one. And so now I can keep writing the code here without changing the initial one. So what I wanted to quickly show you here is that slider. So we can use the input. So as I said, this is now an input, and the type is of range. And then we set a minimum value. We can set that to 0 and a max value to 10. Let's see. And there we go. So now this is of course an uncontrolled element now. So right now React is not in charge of controlling this value. And so what you need to do, as you can imagine, is now make this input element a controlled element, and then also this one right here. So with this, you will practice what we just learned a little bit earlier, right? And in case you have any doubt, you can just go back to that lecture and check out the code that you wrote there. So let me just show you here the result so you know what you have to build. So good luck with this challenge, and I see you back here in a few minutes once you are ready. All right, let's now quickly supercharge basically our counter component. So most of the things are actually not going to change here. So we already have the step state. All we have to do is to connect it now, so with this input element. So the value of this element should be, of course, controlled by that step state. And then we need the onChange handler, just like before. So we get the current event, and then we set the step based on that event. So event.target.value. And then we can get rid here of this button. And let's see. Yeah, that works already. And indeed, well, that doesn't really work, does it? So it is adding the 10 as a string. So we have a bug in our code. So the problem, as you can see, is that this value here is taken as a string. So that's actually the problem that we had before and that we detected using the React DevTools. And in fact, the DevTools are also available here. So we could see the same thing here. So the state is 10. So 10 as a string. So we just do what we did before, which is to convert this value to a number before we then place it into the state. So let's reload that here. Take some time. And let's set it to something. And that's working now. And you see here that we have, well, that's not correct really, for some reason. But what matters is that here it's actually working. So maybe the integration here in Code Sandbox is not as good, but yeah, never mind. What matters is that this part is working already, and now all we have to do is to create an input element here as well. So that should also not be so hard. So we no longer need this span, but instead we will use an input of the type text. The value here is count, and then on change, basically we want almost the same thing as before. So we get the current event and then set count, and then this time we're not going to forget the conversion part. So we convert to a number e.target.value. And now all we need to do is to close down this element, give it a save, and yeah, this all looks correct to me. Let's see. Well, something's happening here. Let's close down the React tools maybe. Yeah, anyway, let's just reload here just to be sure. So this works. And now if we input a value here, yeah, nice. So that's really, really nice. So with this, we have a bit more control over the component, and we can calculate dates from now, which is quite helpful. But yeah, let's just review quickly what we did here. So these two input elements are now controlled elements for the same reason that we already saw before. So we have a piece of state, and we then connect that piece of state, for example here the step, with the input element. So we force this input field to take the value of the step piece of state. But that alone is of course not enough, because with that we would not be able to then change here the value. And so we then need to handle the event of actually trying to change, so of sliding here basically. So each time we slide, the change event is fired off. And so then each time that happens, we want to set the step with the current value of the element. So that's e.target.value. Nice. And finally, the only thing that's missing is that reset. So that button right here. So let's then create a button down here. Let's create another div where we place that button into. So reset, close that, and close the div. So we want something to happen on the click, so we use the onClick prop. And now here let's actually do this as a separate function, because here we will need to set two pieces of state. So let's call this handle reset. Now that does of course not exist, so we get this complaint. So let's fix that. Handle reset. And so what's going to happen here? Well, all we have to do is to set these two back to their initial state using their setter functions. So set count will go back to 0 and the step will go back to 1. So yeah, that works. The only thing that's different between the demo that I showed you is that we should not display this reset button when there's actually nothing to reset. So basically what we want to do is to conditionally render this part here. So let's wrap it into a JavaScript block, and then we can say if count is equal to 0, or if step is different than 1. So count different from 0 or step different from 1. So 0 is the default for count and 1 is the default for step. And so if one of these defaults is different, then we want to conditionally render this part. So for that we can again use the AND operator, or maybe just, why not, let's this time use the ternary operator. So in this case, maybe we should just put a parenthesis around this. So just to make sure that this is one condition that gets evaluated first. So in this case, render this, and else render nothing. All right, so as soon as we change this, we get a button, or as soon as we change this, the same. Beautiful. So that's exactly what we wanted to build. And so we are finished with the challenge, and we are finished with this section. And so let's waste no time and let's keep working on the far away list right in the next lecture of the next section.